Hello, my beautiful motorheads. Welcome to Féroce, where we inspire you to live fiercely. I'm your host, Anik Magat. Today's guest is the Bearded Fen, also known as Andrew Marsh. He comes from South Africa, and today we discuss his podcast about motorcycling, tattoos, and the arts called the Bearded Fen. And we also talk about making midlife changes in career. Why are you called the Bearded Fen? The bearded part I get, but what's
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of people ask me that question. And so my surname is Marsh, and Fen is another word for Marsh. So, when I was in school, I always used to sign off Fen. And
okay?
then a little bit later, I decided, oh, well, Bearded Fen just sounds like a cool handle.
It is a cool handle. I love it, actually. So you're coming in from South Africa.
That is correct.
Yes. And what's this awesome background you got behind you?
It is a well curated background. Everyone asks me about it and say, oh, you got such a cool office. And then I have to be honest and say, look, it's just the background. But
Oh,
one
is it?
day, yeah, no, it is. It is. But one day we'll have this in my studio.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm manifesting it.
I can see that. It already looks like it's there.
Maybe I shouldn't tell people.
No, I
Maybe I
don't
should
think
say,
you
you
should.
know, it took me a long time to paint that.
So we met years ago through Instagram, which at that time I would say maybe Instagram was a lot more personable.
Yes.
But through that, you had me years ago on your podcast. As a matter of fact, it was 5 years ago. And I was episode 5, which I took a,
Sure. Is it that long ago? Wow.
yeah.
Thank you, COVID.
I know, right? Well, maybe you could say a little bit about the podcast and what the focus was.
Yeah. So I, um, I really enjoy podcasts. I mean, this has like become my go-to thing. Life is busy and I'm, on the treadmill or I'm working in the kitchen or whatever it is. And I really enjoy the format. And I was like, gee, I'd love to have my own podcast. So I just started thinking about it and like, what could I do and what subjects could I talk about? And I thought, well, I just want to be myself. Why don't I talk about the things that I normally do day to day? Motorcycles, tattoos, and creative stuff. So I enjoy going to live music and good coffee, artisan kind of stuff and everything. So I thought, okay, well, these are the guys that I'm going to talk to. These are the ones that I'm interested in talking to. So hopefully other people will be interested in it as well. So that's basically how it started.
And what inspired you to choose specific people? Because you've interviewed a lot of people over the years.
Yeah. So I started reaching out to people that I was in contact with already, people that I'd, in my network. So the first guy that I did an episode with is a guy up in Montreal, and I had been following his YouTube channel for quite a long time. And somewhere along the line, we had started talking. We was talking about what tires are you using on your adventure motorcycle. It's that contentious issue, right? Everyone's got an opinion. So we had been talking about tires, and I said, "Okay, what tires are you running?" I think he had a F800 GS at the time, and I was like, "What tires are you?" And so we had a conversation. So when I kicked off the podcast, mm, you got to all the people you know. So I sent him an email, and I said, "Listen, I'm starting this podcast. Would you be keen to come on it?" And he said, "Yeah, sure." So and that's where it started. And then every time I was out and about meeting new people, uh, one of my habits is to get to know people, like what's
Mhm.
your story? What do you do? What you up to? What do you enjoy doing kind of thing. And this is a joy of riding motorcycles or being in some sort of club or playing sport or whatever, interacting with new people all the time, is that you meet the most interesting people.
Mhm.
And along the way, I would meet people and I'd say, "Oh, that's a great story. I've got a podcast. Would you like to come on it?" And, some people say, "Oh, no, I'm a little bit scared." And others will say, "Yeah, sure." And that's how it came about. As I started doing it and talking to more people and then putting on the podcast ahead, I just started picking up all these people that were interested in having a chat.
That's great. And Are there any people that stand out in your mind as far as were a memorable experience of interviewing them?
So I suppose when you go into these things, you always have goals, right? Okay, I just want to, when I get that person on my podcast, okay, I've made it. I really enjoy watching live music.
Okay.
And there's a blues rock musician in South Africa. And he's actually well known internationally in that genre. I mean, he's played with Joe Satriani and those guys. And I always wanted to have a chat to him. Like I'd see him and chatted to him after shows previously, sign the shirt, sign the album kind of thing and whatever. And I'm like, this is my goal. I need to have this guy on the podcast. And I went to a live gig and it was actually hosted at a friend of mine's place. A friend of mine's got a venue. It's like a basement, takes 60 people, live music. You get dinner and your drinks and coffee and cake. And I was chatting to him afterwards and I said, oh, geez, Dan, I've started this podcast. Would you like to come on? He said, sure, I'd love to. He says, here's my manager's number. Just arrange it and, we'll get it done. And so like, oh, this is so great. The only problem was that I did the chat with him we've got a thing which is called the Barnyard, which is like a little theater kind of thing. It's like very, very small and intimate. So it probably takes about 1,000 people, but um, it's like really well designed. It's got beautiful acoustics and all that kind of stuff. And the guy said, "Yeah, no, you guys can go in the back there to the changing room to go and do the conversation," which was great, except it sounded like we were talking in the toilet. So the most important guest that I wanted on has got the crappiest sound.
And it's
So
a
that is
musician
it.
on top of it who it
And
does
it's a
not sound
musician on
right.
top of it.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, like, I mean, for me, that was like the goal that I wanted to get to, and I got there, and it was really great and all that. And like I said to you earlier, I'm in the motorcycle sort of, fraternity and living in Africa. I'm just in awe of women that travel around the world on their motorcycles, and they especially in Africa because, I'm in Africa and I don't think I would ride my bike up there. But here, these women are traveling around the world solo, and I'm just amazed by that. I have got a lot of respect for them. And I was fortunate enough to have a conversation with one of them. I think her handle's on her bike. Her
Mhm.
name's Kinga. She's originally from Poland. She landed up in Australia and then decided to ride her bike. I think she said, okay, she's going to ride her bike back to Poland. And she just never stopped after that. And it was like a really interesting conversation because obviously I'm interested in the safety
Mhm.
aspect. And she said, you'll be quite surprised that in Africa, the men are actually quite intimidated by a woman riding a motorcycle.
Huh.
So they don't give them any trouble. So, yeah, I found that interesting. But yeah, that was a great conversation. I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed that one.
I have a little bit of a selfish ask because having just started a podcast, is there any advice that you would give somebody starting new?
Yeah, just make sure your sound is great.
Okay,
Okay,
I'm trying.
because it doesn't matter how good the content is. If the sound is crap, no one's going to listen to it. Yeah, I think that is the thing is that if it's got good sound, people will listen to it. And I suppose, like for me, the idea was okay, inconsistency. Like I think all the other stuff that you hear on these guys that are telling you how to grow your brand, kind of thing. But for me, it was I want to have a conversation.
Mhm.
I want it to be like I'm having a cup of coffee with someone that I'm interested in getting to know. And it just so happens that there are a couple of other people that are eavesdropping on this conversation.
Yeah.
So I never wanted my podcast to come across as an interview.
Mhm.
So how I would do it is I would go into the conversation and I would know a little bit about the person, but I would try not to learn too much about the person. And I would have a couple of like questions that I could use just to keep the conversation flowing because you would never know how the conversation is going to go, unless you know the person at a certain level, and then just allow them to take the conversation wherever they wanted. Um, I mean, that's just my take on it, because there was a podcast that I was following in Australia. It it was called the Daily Talk Show, and these guys are doing a podcast every day. I mean, like, for that, I already had respect, because, like, where do you get the content for that stuff?
Hmm.
But what I liked about that podcast was they weren't necessarily talking about all the kind of stuff that I was interested in. Some days they would be talking about stuff that I wouldn't go actively look for that podcast. But what made me listen to that podcast every day was just the fact that I felt like I was having coffee with a couple of my mates and I was just listening to the conversation. I mean, it's relatively inexpensive to start a podcast these
Hmm.
days, because you could be using a cell phone, you could use some really inexpensive lav mics. That's how I started. Now I've got the good old Rode mic stuff. But as long as your sound is pretty decent, the rest of the stuff is pretty easy to get right. And
Yeah.
then for me, it's about what sort of atmosphere do you want to create? You
Yeah.
know,
The big thing for me with this podcast is that I want to connect and make a community much smaller across the whole world. Motorcyclists are not a huge population, and we're all connected in some way. And I think that at this point in time, people are really looking for connection with other humans. And like the daily podcast that you listen to, it's like I want to have more interaction, and I want to make our community just smaller and smaller, and have everybody inspire each other with what they're doing. So
absolutely.
this is like maybe a good segue into a little bit about what you do. You have a day job.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I do have a day job. I often joke that my day job interferes with my hobbies,
I
which
yeah,
is actually
probably.
true. Which is actually true. But you know what? The reality is we all got to keep the lights on,
Mhm.
and I suppose we got to fund our hobbies somehow. I work in the corporate space. I work for a mining company. I'm on the IT side in software development and system support, data management, and all that kind of stuff. I enjoy what I'm doing. Um, Corporate life can get a bit challenging sometimes. And yeah, I mean, it definitely helps me pay for all my hobbies.
And outside of there, you do a ton of different things. Like you actually have several businesses, I would say. You have the 3D printing.
That is correct. Yes,
Yeah. You also are back in school.
that is correct. Yeah, it's actually been quite daunting because I haven't studied for a long time, and it's taken me a while to find the time, to set aside to do some studying. And again, you have to make some tough decisions, especially even when you start a podcast. Like, you need to almost like prove to yourself or convince yourself that you're going to have the time to put into it. Because it's one thing having a conversation with someone, you've got to prep for it. You've got to set up the time. You got to get the timing right. You edit it, post it, advertise it, and all that kind of stuff. And the same thing was like now with me wanting to study again. First of all, it took me a long time to decide what I wanted to do
Hmm.
next. I could do a deep dive into sort of the IT space, and there's a lot happening there. It's moving very quickly. Lots of new technologies coming out. The advent of Gen AI has changed how things are being done, created plenty more new opportunities. And as an IT guy, you got to stay on top of these things,
Yeah.
which is one of the things I could have focused on. But I suppose, I think we all get to these stages where we feel like we need a change in our lives. Like, it's not like I don't like IT anymore. I still want to do IT stuff, but I just want something a little bit different just to stimulate me and all that. So I've decided to go and study to become a life coach or a professional life coach. I'm not too sure which niche I'm going to go into. Do I want to focus on, no, I could focus on stuff that I'm familiar with, like the corporate environment, so leadership, executive coaching, that kind of stuff. But I'm also passionate about mental health. So I'm looking at opportunities there. What are the opportunities in bringing the mental health into coaching? And when you talk about life coaching, and I suppose doesn't matter what niche you're going to be coaching, there's always that aspect. If it's business coaching, like leadership or executive coaching, there's always a life or a personal life connection into that. So you might go in there doing leadership coaching, but you might land up assisting the person navigate some friction in their personal lives, and vice versa. You chat to someone, they might be wanting to unlock some potential in their personal life,
Mhm.
and you might find that the work needs to be done on the work side. So I'm very open to who I'm going to coach in the future, but I would like to find a niche where I believe I'm adding the most value. And it's
What
quite daunting because we're doing psychology, which I've actually got an interest in. I'm fascinated by psychology and neuroscience. And I'm also looking at how can I bring that into coaching in the future.
I find it fascinating that you decided to go from IT to this, to coaching, because it seems like such a wide gap. And it's great because you don't look like a typical life coach or what anybody would maybe think of as a typical life coach, whatever that might be.
Yes.
So, how did you initially get interested in coaching?
Yeah, I suppose, a lot of the time these things are like little signals along the way of your journey in life, and they all seem to converge into one idea at some stage, right? And like I said, when I was in school, I wanted to become an industrial psychologist.
Okay.
And I then got offered a bursary and I went and I studied chemistry, right? So and then I landed up in the mining industry and I was working in the plants, in the coal plant and so on. And then decided I got into writing my own programs to help me in my job. And I really enjoyed that. And so I pivoted into IT. So you probably find that my interest in psychology started like when I was in school.
Mhm.
And then along the way, I've always, you know, I'd like to believe that I'm a leader. So I've always been interested in like self help stuff. I mean, one of my favorite books is Stephen Covey's Seven Habits. And I've read lots of other books along the way, Malcolm Gladwell, so on and so on. So I've always had an interest in that. But it was like, that's what I've never thought of that as something that I could get involved in other than, demonstrating those leadership skills or managerial skills in the corporate space or in a company that I'm working for. And then some years ago, I went to a seminar which was called Neuroscience for Leadership. I'm interested in neuroscience. So I'd gone to this one day seminar and I met a lady there who was presenting, and her name is Dr. Tara Swartz. And she's got a bit of a South African connection. She's a Indian lady. I think she was born in India, grew up in the UK, came to South Africa and worked as a psychiatrist, a child psychiatrist, and married a South African guy. Since got divorced, but also decided that psychiatry wasn't something that she was really enjoying. She enjoys the subject and all that kind of stuff, but the kind of people or the zone that she was working in was not exactly the zone that she wanted to work in. So then she became an executive coach. And I don't know, that like stuck in my back of my mind. And I suppose in a way, I didn't understand what coaching was in
Mhm.
its true sense. And even though I liked the idea of being an executive coach, like, oh, I'd love to be an executive coach, I never thought it was something that I could do. Now that I understand what coaching is about or how coaching works, you actually realize that even though you're not executive level or you've never been at executive level, you still have the ability to coach someone that's operating at that level. And I suppose along the way, um, learning more about what coaching was and going for coaching myself, I've had a couple of coaches over the last couple of years. Again, like with the podcasting, I went for coaching and I thought, this is so great. So I'd love to be a coach. So I think all these things started coming together because, like I said, I really enjoy listening to podcasts. And the kind of podcast that I've been listening to since COVID is all the like sort of Stephen Bartlett's and Andrew Huberman and Mel Robbins and all those kind of stuff. What's the other guy's name? Um, Adam Grant.
Yes.
And I'm like just been thoroughly enjoying all of that stuff. And then thinking, okay, but like, how do I now, in a sense, pay this forward? Because in a way, I see that these people are helping me, and I'm almost like curating this content, and I like to teach other people. I get a kick out of helping other. I don't want to see other people struggle, right? So, question was, how could I formally help other people? So, yeah, and then probably about a year ago, I started questioning this whole IT thing. Am I really enjoying it? Is that IT, or is it the environment that I'm working in, or is it the combination, and so on? And then I did a lot of reflection. And I thought, okay, I still enjoy IT, but I'm just not enjoying the corporate space. And I've been in the company that I'm in now. I've been there 18 years, and it's a long time. And I just feel like I need a change. And then I started thinking, okay, like, what could I do next? And this coaching thing just kept on coming up. So I investigated more, looked at different institutions, understood how the certifications work and what you needed and who were the accredited institutions to go study at. And I looked at the ones in South Africa, so the business schools and so on. And then I landed on as a place called the South African College of Applied Psychology. And because they've got a psychology sort of lean to them, so they teach you the psychology first and then they take you into the coaching. I thought, okay, now that really ticks my box. So that's what I'm doing at the moment.
It's interesting that you are making this change. And I think that we can get complacent in life and just accept that things are going that the way they are and maybe not be happy with them and continue that. But you're deciding to make this change and to help other people.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder as I'm listening to you that you talking a little bit about the executive coaching, that if you even at work were receiving a certain amount of coaching, it also might have provided a way for you to want to stay in that job. This is your journey of going elsewhere.
Yeah.
But it kind of proves out to me in saying that everybody needs a little bit of support and help. And maybe you could talk a little bit about what the difference is between coaching and therapy, because I think some people don't really understand kind of what the difference is, or they might have a negative aspect on coaching thinking that it is going to therapy, which it's not really.
Yeah, that's right. I better look up the correct definition quickly.
I
Uh,
told you to, but just more your take so like maybe people can have an
yeah,
understanding of
so
exactly what it entails.
so I suppose there are three sort of types of assistants that often get confused, or people misinterpret what each one of them is. So it's coaching, mentoring, and therapy. Okay. So like a mentor is someone that's like really experienced and is assisting a less experienced person in a particular sort of field and sharing their knowledge based on their experience. Okay. A therapist is someone that's trained in psychology, and what they're doing is they trying to help you understand what's happened in your past, right? And they will be using different techniques to help you unlock understanding of the past. Coaching is more about looking forward. You want to understand the past a little bit, but you don't want to get too stuck in the past. And then what you're doing is you're trying to say, okay, what can we change now that's going to help you unlock the potential for the future? Whereas, like therapy is trying to help you deal with something that's happened with you in the past, and coaching is trying to help you unlock something so that you can move forward. I hope I got it right.
I know there's no test here. There's no test here, but I think that like there is some confusion when I talk to people about coaching just as to like what it actually is.
Yeah, yeah,
So not to totally segue, but I want to get a little bit back into motorcycles. And this is a question that
yes.
I ask every guest, and that is how many motorcycles do you own?
I currently have three motorcycles, and I was saying to my daughter yesterday, there's space in the garage for one more. I don't know which one to get.
What are you looking at?
I don't know. I mustn't even think about it because the problem is that I then go into Facebook Marketplace. And I'm going,
Oh,
and then the dollar signs start ticking in my head and say, okay, what can I sell to, because if I start looking, then I know I'm in trouble.
well, is
Yeah,
that necessarily a bad thing?
it's all about timing.
Okay. Okay. We can wait on that.
Yeah.
You have two beautiful daughters, which I've seen grow up on Instagram, which is a very odd reality these days. But do either one of them ride?
Unfortunately not.
Okay.
The youngest one is very keen to learn, but she hasn't got there yet. She comes on the back of the bike with me occasionally. My eldest daughter's a little bit more risk averse. So I'm not forcing her. I'm just saying to her, listen, if you want to, I will help you get, because I mean, riding motorcycles is about confidence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to force them to do it, but it's open and they can if they want to. And I'm not the father who's going to say, you will never go on the back of a motorcycle with your boyfriend or anything like that. And I suppose it's because I understand what riding motorcycles and connecting with fellow motorcycle riders, what that does. I mean, in terms of, just augmenting your life, in terms of meeting new people, getting out onto your bike, going out into the countryside, taking in the view that you're seeing, getting to the other side, maybe grabbing a cup of coffee, maybe a lunch or breakfast or whatever, and being in community with these people. And also just the sort of like the break from day to day life. I mean, I know each person's riding experience is different, but if I was to explain what mine is that when I climb on my motorcycle, I don't have any headsets, no earphones or anything like that. A, because the safety aspect, and B, because it's my alone time. And when I climb on their motorcycle and I get into that sort of rhythm, you're riding out into the countryside, you're focusing on the road, obviously safety first. You're riding safely, you're riding defensively, you very alert, but you just become focused on the road and the journey and the scenery. And what it does for me is it's almost like meditation. I don't recommend meditating on your motorcycle because you're probably going to have an accident. But I suppose it's like almost getting into that like flow. And what I find is that when I'm riding my motorcycle, that my thoughts start to unravel. I'm not actively thinking, but I'm just like in that zone. And I'm sure road runners or cyclists or various types of exercise would, sporting activities would give you a similar experience. But that's my experience. And I actually find that if I don't at least climb on my bike once a week to go get coffee, I actually get very edgy. And even if I just take a 25-minute ride one way and 25 minutes back and grab a cup of coffee, what it does for my sort of my mental battery, if you want to put it that way, is it just seems so much easier to deal with, the week ahead. So that's my draw to it. And I would like my girls to experience that and decide whether that's for them or not. And if it's not for them, then it's not for them. And if it is, then, they've got my full support.
Which means you'll be back on Marketplace.
Well, so, so how you justify buying a motorcycle? Like
Of
now,
course. Yeah.
I don't have a reason to justify buying a motorcycle. So I told you I've got 3 motorcycles in the garage. So the first one I got was back in 2011, and it's an old 1978 R80/7 BMW.
Mm.
Okay. And I can tell you the long story about how I got that later. And then later I bought myself a 1200 GS because I wanted to do adventure riding. And then I've got a Royal Enfield, which is it's a 500 Electra Bullet Electra. It's a 2006 model, but it's one of the ones that's built in India. And it actually belonged to a mate of mine. And I've always wanted to own a Royal Enfield. And one day he said to me, he's not riding his bike anymore. He thinks maybe he must sell it. And I said, well, look, when you're ready, just let me know how much you want for it and just give me like first right of refusal. And the reason how I could justify buying that bike, because I already had two in the garage, was this is a great bike for my girls to learn how to ride motorcycles. And it is, but
But it's also like passing the buck a little bit.
it's like buying that Christmas present for
Yeah.
your child that you're going to play with.
Oh, totally,
Yeah.
totally. And
Yeah.
I totally support that kind of behavior. Any way to get more bikes into the garage, I think is a good thing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You guys are headed into your spring, right?
Yes. And it's freezing at the moment. So I don't know how much you guys see across the water there, but like 3 days ago, it was perfect spring weather. It was actually like in the 20 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. And oh, this is fantastic. It's great riding weather. I was actually out on my bike. I thought, oh, geez, what a beautiful day. The next day, we got word that it's going to get cold. And where did it get cold? To the extent that, okay, so I'm in Johannesburg, so fairly inland, but there's a highway down to Durban, which is at the coast, and it's called the N3. And that road was closed because they had so much snow, which is not a
Oh,
common thing in South Africa.
wow.
And there were people that were stuck overnight. And I suppose that's a common thing in the US, but not very common in South Africa as a result of snow. And there was black ice. Well, I mean, I've never experienced black ice, but, I know about it. And yeah, so it's actually been very cold. So we haven't really got into our proper spring yet, but I'm sure it's going to start warming up now.
Okay. And do you have any trips planned for this spring and summer? Or this riding season?
Yeah. So we've got so this mate of mine that was on my podcast earlier, previously, Joe Fleming from Bonifide Moto. He's got a touring company, or it's Bonifide Moto, and that's what he does. He organizes trips in South Africa. And he's had this trip that's been going for, I think, since 2015, so 9 years now. It's called the Bubble Run. And the reason why it's called the Bubble Run was because the one trip, I might get the story a bit wrong, but the one trip that they did, I don't know, there was like maybe 5 or 10 guys that went on it. And it was raining so much that the only way that they could actually see properly was those, if they had the Bulltwell helmets with the bubble shield on the front. So they decided to call it the Bubble Run. And so he's been doing that as an annual event. And what we do is we travel from Johannesburg to Mpumalanga to an area called Sabi, a town called Sabi. And we actually camp there for 3 or 4 days. And then we do out rides every day, and we do dirt rides, and we also do tar roads. And it's beautiful country out there. If the roads are in good condition, because they go through their phases. But if the roads are good, it's awesome riding. It's beautiful view and everything. So I think he's decided to end it. So this is going to be the last one this year. So that's the only planned trip I've got now for the remainder of the year, is to do that trip in December. Yeah. So that's the only trip. And the problem is I'm not riding as much as I would like to. I'm doing these occasional rides on the weekend. And I don't know why, but life just seems to be so busy at the moment. Work is busy, a lot going on. And obviously I started studying. So I'm not being able to find the time to carve out to climb on the bike and go out for 5 days kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
but unfortunate,
Well, I think life is like that, where there are seasons in which we ride more or we don't, depending on what's
Mm,
going on. So I have no doubt that, maybe the next few years until you get your degree all sussed out might be a little bit slow. But if you're going at least out to take it for your awesome coffee runs, because you definitely are
it's,
documenting all the hot coffee shops in the area.
yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. And I'm not beating myself up about the fact that I'm not doing these rides.
Mhm.
I just understand that at the moment it's just not possible.
Yeah.
And I've got plenty rides in my mind that I want to do, and those are on the bucket list. So I will get to them. It's just basically, timing at the moment. Yeah.
Because you are really good at documenting your trips and your riding and
Yeah.
your coffee stops. I do want to say that in the show notes, I will make sure to put your Instagram handle down there.
Great. Thanks very much. Yeah. So I haven't been because I'm not riding, I'm not documenting as much as I would want to. I mean, my intention was, I think towards the end of last year, I decided to split out my personal Instagram and my writing material, my writing content. And I really wanted to put more effort into the content that I created for my motorcycle. And as you mentioned, I'm including coffee in that because I've become very fond of a good cup of coffee, and it's great to find new coffee places and new coffee beans. And there was a video that I posted that I just decided I was going to go for a ride. And I thought, well, yeah, I can't think of any nice coffee shop to go to. So I'll take my coffee with me. So I took my mocha pots and my camping gas thing and took all my bits and pieces, and I went out into the country, and I found a safe place to stop on the side of the road, made my mocha pot coffee, and you'll be surprised at how many people stopped to say hello.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was amazing.
That's
Yeah, I
awesome.
was I was like, "Well, I'm chatting." I was probably there for like 45 minutes, just standing on the side of the road with my coffee cup, chatting to people that are driving past. And it's actually not a busy road, but literally almost every person that drove past me stopped. So, how's it going? Yeah, cool. What you up to? No, I'm just having a cup of coffee, taking a bike ride. Oh. And it was Christmas Eve that I
Oh,
did
wow.
this ride. And the guys were telling me, yeah, no, I'm going to my family up the road and we're having a big barbecue. And, and they were like sharing stuff with me. And I'm like, oh, this is fantastic, you
That's
know? So
great. Yeah.
yeah, it just shows you the kind of experiences that you have when you're either in the coffee scene or in the motorcycle scene. Yeah. So the content hasn't been coming as fast and furious as I've wanted it to this year, because I'd really planned that this year I would put more effort into my content creation. It's another one of my hobbies, is like creating content or trying to improve creating content, because I just get a kick out of planning it in my head. Okay, so I'm going to go right there and I'm going to do these shots, and then you come back and you edit it, and it's almost like doing the podcast and then publishing it. And some people, oh, great, you know, bit of feedback and all that kind of stuff. And that's great. So I had a GoPro that I bought like 10 years ago, and it was starting to fall apart. And I was like, okay, I need to buy a new GoPro. And then I was looking around, and then there are these Insta 360 cameras. And it turned out that I could pick up one of those for the same price as a new GoPro. And I thought, okay, you know what? This is a better option, because the problem with the GoPro was you only get one field of view all the time. So if you want different angles, you've got to change the position on the bike and putting in your helmet and giving it to your mates. And you spend your life stopping and doing all this stuff, which is fine. But I thought with the Insta 360 cameras that you have the ability to record in 360 and reframe it afterwards. And then just by putting it in a decent spot on your bike, and it's got a selfie stick and it's invisible. When it stitches the video together, you can't see it. And it looks like you've got a film crew in front of you filming. Plus, you can get your mates riding next to you or in front of you, or if you put on the back behind you. And I've got some really great shots that just from one video and maybe moving it. It's simple. You just just to change the perspective slightly, you've got the selfie stick. Let's say it's on my handlebars in front of me. And then let's say it's only 1 meter. And then I can push it out a little bit more, 1.5, maybe 2 meters or whatever. And just moving it like that. And I can do that while I'm riding safely uh, at a reasonable
Of
speed.
course. Of course.
That perspective change just gives you a little bit more stuff to work with. So it's really great for content creation, specifically for riding and motorcycles. And then what I did is I bought the GPS remote. So it gives you like, you can overlay your speed and it'll give you the GPS route and altitude, elevation or altitude or whatever it is. So that's also nice. It's a bit gimmicky, but it's nice to put that on every now and again because you can see what speed you're doing at least and what direction you're riding. But what I like about the remote is that you can stop and start the recording while you're riding.
Mhm.
Because if you've got the selfie stick and the cameras up there, you've got to push and stop and start. And obviously, if you're just continuously recording, you've got to go and edit all of that stuff at the end. So having the remote allows you to, I'm on a straight road. There's not much really going on. Okay, I can turn the camera off. Oh, look, I'm going through some twisties, beautiful scenery. My mates are riding close to me. I can just, start recording, and that's really great. So I would, if anyone was buying an Insta 360 camera to use on their motorcycle, I would recommend getting the remote as well.
Great.
So that was the plan, was that I was really going to try and sweat this asset that I'd bought to try and create all this content and get these nice videos. But I started off well and then life got in the way.
You'll get back.
But I'll get back to it.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought it up because I've actually been really curious about those cameras. So you just gave me a nice review on it.
Yeah, look. And if you want a review on that, this is not paid sponsorship.
I know,
But,
right? But if
but
360 does want to sponsor,
yeah, well, if they want to send me a new X4 to test out, no
I wouldn't
problem.
say no.
I wouldn't say no. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's nice to get a fresh perspective with that 360 versus like a lot of times some of the motorcycle shots they always sort of look the same. So it's nice to have a little bit of
Yeah.
that diversity.
And, that's the thing is I'm like, I've got this camera, I've got the motorbikes. And I'm like, geez, I've got to, got other stuff to do. But it's all good.
Like I said, there's seasons, and right now you're in a season of changing things. So
Yeah.
when you have a little more
No,
free
that's true.
time, we'll all go back to it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Andrew, I want to say thank you for taking the time out of your schedule and also the time change that we had between the U.S. and South Africa. So again, thank you
Only a
so
pleasure.
much.
Only a pleasure.
And I just want to say to everybody, thank you for being here. Ride smart. Ciao.